Hello and welcome. In this episode, I'm going to share encounters with crawlers. These stories include a man who saw a strange creature while on a hike back in the 80s, and a story sent in from Annie who had an encounter near her home while walking with her daughter one evening. But first, we start with a story coming from a user who was on a FaceTime call with her sister when something terrifying approached her sister's car. I would like to thank Annie for emailing her story to me and allowing me to share it with you. Before we get started, I just want to say that a lot of people turn to posting their stories online because they feel like they can't tell anyone and would be seen as crazy if they did. Most people who experience these beings are traumatized and feel the need to unburden themselves, or just have someone who will believe them listen to their story. If you've had an encounter and you feel like you can't tell anyone for fear of being made fun of, ridiculed, called a liar, or any other reason, email me. You'll find a sympathetic ear here who will believe you. I do want to mention that just because you email me your story, it doesn't mean it will end up in an episode on my channel. Your story can stay between me and you if that's what you want. Also, if you've had an encounter and you'd like to come on an episode and tell your story, email me. My email is wolfwhocriedcryptid@gmail.com. Alright, let's get into today's stories. The first story of this episode comes to us from a user who witnessed her sister having an encounter with a strange creature on a FaceTime call. When she posted her story online, it was the first time she had shared something like this, but the situation left her deeply unsettled, and she posted her story searching for answers. Earlier in the night, before she posted her story online, she was chatting with her sister over FaceTime from 12:54 to 2:07 a.m. During the conversation, her sister was sitting in her car. It was nothing out of the ordinary at first, just she and her sister catching up on her day before heading inside to call it a night. Then, out of nowhere, the screen froze and a very loud knock was heard, followed by her sister screaming in a way she described as unforgettable and etched into her memory. Her sister had spotted what she initially thought was a person walking toward her in her rearview mirror. She then joked about it, saying, "What if it was a skinwalker?" But the joke took a dark turn. Almost immediately after, the figure revealed its horrifying appearance. According to her sister, it was unnaturally pale with hollow, sunken eyes. It also appeared much taller when she saw it directly rather than a passing glance in her rearview mirror, and she estimated it at about 7 feet tall. Then it began moving, sprinting on all fours toward her car. It then opened its mouth wide and let out an ear-shattering scream, leaving her sister feeling like her eardrums had been permanently damaged. Its mouth stretched unnervingly wide, according to her sister, and it looked like blood was dripping from it. Terrified, her sister quickly drove away, managing to get just 0.3 miles down the road. It was there that she encountered her father, who was coming home early from his night shift at work, much earlier than usual. He later shared with her that an intense instinct had pushed him to head home early that night, and to do so right away. The original poster's family has experienced plenty of strange, inexplicable phenomena in the past, things that have left them feeling haunted and uneasy. However, the way her sister reacted after the encounter was something different entirely. She couldn't stop crying or shaking, and the sheer terror was palpable. After the call ended with her sister, the original poster scoured the internet for similar stories. While she had come across some that sounded vaguely familiar, a key difference stood out to her. Other people's descriptions of similar entities often lacked a mouth, but her sister was absolutely certain this one had a bloody, gaping maw. She posted her story online, desperate to find any advice or insights. She urges anyone who knows what this could have been or has suggestions for protecting her family to let her know, and that she would be incredibly grateful. The series of events in this encounter has gone far beyond what she feels like her family can endure. I've read this story a few times, and every time I do, I think more and more that this was actually a crawler instead of a skinwalker. The description of the creature, including it running on all fours, sounds more like a crawler to me. I'm also pretty sure I would have had the same reaction she did and peeled out of there too. No way I'm sticking around to find out what this thing is going to do when it comes charging at me like that, especially with it screaming the way it did. I don't blame her for getting out of there. I'm just glad this thing was gone when she and her father got back home. Also, I'd be remiss to leave out that the way she describes the mouth opening unnaturally wide and blood seeping out does sound kind of like a Wendigo to me. However, something about this story, and it may just be me, screams crawler. What do you think about this one? And what do you think she saw that night? Crawler, skinwalker, or something else? The next story comes from a poster who had an encounter with what he believes was a crawler back in the 1980s. His story takes place in Arkansas at Greer's Ferry Lake. He was there with his girlfriend at the time and on a hike when things took a scary turn. He begins by saying that he's still trying to wrap his head around the fact that there's an entire forum dedicated to what people are calling crawlers. It also turns out that many years before he posted his story online, he had an encounter that lines up eerily well with the descriptions others have shared. Over the years, he's posted about his experience in different places, hoping to find others who've seen something similar. But no one has ever seemed to have an account that matched his. Just a few weeks prior, he shared a brief summary of the incident on another forum, and someone pointed him toward the one about crawlers. Back in the mid-1980s, he had an experience on Sugar Loaf, an island in Arkansas's Greer Ferry Lake. The island rises up with a hilltop that offers stunning views, and there's a trail winding up the south side to the top. He had a boat and decided to visit the island with his girlfriend at the time to go on a hike. They climbed to the summit, admired the view, and started their descent. It was near sunset, but there was still plenty of light for good visibility. As they made their way down the trail and the hill, they began to hear something trailing them, moving parallel through the woods. The sound, a distinct crunching of dead leaves and brush, came from roughly 100 to 150 feet away. Although it wasn't visible, the noise made its position fairly clear. At first, it didn't seem like anything to worry about, but when they paused for a moment, the sound abruptly stopped as well. They started walking again, and whatever was in the woods resumed following them, keeping their exact pace. Testing it several times by stopping and starting, they confirmed that it was mirroring their movements, as though they were being stalked. His initial assumption was that it might be someone out for a hike or camping nearby, attempting to spook them as a prank. By the time they neared the shore, the unease had grown stronger, and he found himself angry with the situation. It had crossed the line from irritating to unsettling. Determined to confront whoever or whatever was following them, he left the trail headed into the woods toward the source of the noise. Oddly, as soon as he began moving in its direction, the sound stopped entirely. No footsteps, no crunching leaves, nothing but his own movement. He ventured about 100 feet off the trail and stopped, convinced he was close to where the sound had last come from. Standing amongst the thick brush, he scanned the area. And that's when he spotted it. Roughly 30 feet away, a figure darted out from behind a tree. It was shockingly tall, easily around 7 feet, with a skeletal build. Its limbs were long and thin, and its pale, almost ghostly white skin looked stretched over its bones. He didn't catch a glimpse of this thing's face as it ran away, but it had no clothes on, just that eerie white skin. The creature moved with incredible speed, disappearing into the dense forest in mere seconds. Unlike the descriptions he's since read, it wasn't crawling or hunched over, it was running upright on its hind legs. The sight of it was so unnatural that his mind struggled to make sense of what he had just seen. He remembers standing there, frozen in disbelief, repeating to himself, "That can't be real." He was so overwhelmed by fear and shock that he couldn't move for what felt like 30 seconds or more. Paralyzed and unable to lift his legs to turn back, he eventually managed to turn around to the trail and rejoin his girlfriend. Without hesitation, they headed straight to the boat and left the island. That was the end of his encounter, though it remains one of the strangest and most haunting experiences of his life. He shared his story with a few friends in the years that followed, but gave up after a while because no one believed him. Honestly, he couldn't blame them. If someone had told him the same story, he admitted that he would have trouble believing it too. The way he describes this creature fits exactly with how crawlers are said to look, and behave for that matter, darting from behind a tree and moving very fast. I have no doubt that if it wanted to harm him or his girlfriend, it would have done so without a moment's notice. And there's nothing they would have been able to do to stop it. But luckily, this wasn't an overly aggressive crawler and took off into the woods when it was spotted. I don't blame him for being paralyzed by fear or shock, and I believe most of us would be too. And the others who weren't paralyzed by fear or shock, they'd probably be running away. He also mentioned that when he and his girlfriend stopped, this thing stopped, and when they started walking again, it did too. This has happened in so many stories I've heard and read. It's almost like whatever is walking along with people, no matter the creature, it tries to mask its own footsteps by walking at the same time the people they're following do. It's a disturbing trend to say the least, and like the original poster said in this story, it's like they are stalking people. If I were him, I don't think I'd be going back to that island. Also, another thing I want to point out is that a lot of people turn to the online community because no one believes them when they tell their stories. Well, I for one believe him because there are stories about these creatures coming from all over the world, and I think it's just too big of a coincidence that that many people from that many places would make up stories like that. What do you think about this story? What would you have done if you were in his shoes? Also, would you go back to that island after an experience like that? The final story of this episode comes to us from a subscriber who emailed in her story. This is the second story sent in by Annie, who also shared her encounter with a white wolf that protected her from a perceived cryptid when she was younger. That story can be found in a separate video on this channel titled "A Wolf Saved Me." I'd like to thank Annie for emailing in her story and allowing me to share it with you. Her story takes place in August of 2020. Coincidentally, this encounter occurred about 3 weeks after she and her family returned from their vacation in the Huron-Manistee National Forest. While they were there, they experienced strange mechanical clanging sounds every night between 12 a.m. and 4 a.m., along with some eerie screeches. She wasn't sure if the two incidences were connected, but the timing struck her as an odd coincidence. Since the pandemic had left them feeling confined, she and her family had developed a habit of going for walks around dusk in their neighborhood. The walks were partly to shake off the cabin fever and partly because they enjoyed seeing the wildlife. Even though they lived in the metro Detroit area, their location felt like a hidden rural haven. Their home is surrounded by woods and fields and borders a large wetlands conservation area. Each evening they would stroll and admire the animals: deer, raccoons, wild hares, squirrels, an eagle, and coyotes, an abundance of creatures in their natural habitat. But on this particular night, something was off. For the first time, there were no animals in sight. It struck her as odd, but she didn't dwell on it. Towards the end of their walk, they were on a street adjacent to their own, facing a large overgrown field across from their house. The grass stood roughly 4 feet high. Annie and her daughter were talking as they walked when something caught her eye. At first, she couldn't make out what it was. She just noticed movement. It was on all fours running in the field, but it appeared elevated almost a foot or two above the grass. Its color was a pale grayish white. As they continued toward it, she initially assumed it must be an albino deer, but it turned out that she was very wrong. Her daughter grabbed her arm and said, "Mom, what is that?" That's when Annie got a clearer look at it. The figure had a humanoid shape with a head, shoulders, 2 arms, and 2 legs. Its skin, entirely smooth and hairless, resembled shark skin with a grayish-white hue. It was moving around the field with alarming speed, so fast it was difficult to comprehend. She had never seen anything move that quickly, darting from one end of the field to the other in mere seconds. Its arms were longer than what she would expect from a human, though its legs seemed proportionate to its body. On all fours, it stood about 5 to 6 feet tall, and she could only imagine it would reach 7 to 8 feet tall if it stood upright. Both Annie and her daughter stood frozen, their minds struggling to make sense of what they were witnessing. She was so shocked that despite holding her phone, the thought of taking a picture never even crossed her mind. She now understands why people who have strange encounters often fail to capture them on camera. Her entire focus was on processing the bizarre sight in front of her. One thing she knew for certain, whatever it wasn't human, and its speed was beyond anything natural. Her maternal instincts kicked in and her priority became protecting her daughter, who was 10 years old at the time. Annie leaned down and whispered in her daughter's ear, instructing her to run straight for home as fast as she could, cutting through the neighboring yard. Once inside, she was to lock the doors and not open them for any reason unless she physically saw her mother. She made it clear that no matter what she heard or saw, she was to keep running. Her daughter, understandably shaken, protested, but there was no room for argument. The creature hadn't seemed to notice them yet, but she had no way of knowing if her daughter's movements would attract its attention. If it did, Annie was determined that the creature would come after her and not her daughter. Her daughter did exactly what she was told, and thankfully this thing didn't seem to notice either of them. The creature effortlessly vaulted over the 8 feet tall fence as if it were nothing at all, vanishing into the wetlands. Roughly 2 weeks after that encounter, she stumbled upon a Michigan paranormal Facebook page where another woman, located about 35 minutes away, described seeing a whitish gray creature. Out of curiosity, Annie reached out to the woman through direct message, and their experiences turned out to be almost identical. Same time of night, same kind of wetlands adjacent area. Interestingly, the creature didn't seem to notice or care about the woman seeing it either. It simply ran around before disappearing into the wetlands, much like what Annie and her daughter had witnessed. A few months after this, she caught another fleeting glimpse of this thing, this time on the wetlands side of the fence. It was just there for a split second, but she immediately knew it was the same creature. What's even stranger is how drastically the wildlife around her home had changed. Previously, they would spot a variety of animals daily, and usually right in their yard: deer, squirrels, and more. Now, months could pass without them seeing so much as a squirrel. Other unusual occurrences started happening around her home as well. Several times, something smacked the exterior walls of their house, hard enough to make her heart race. On multiple occasions, she heard what sounded like footsteps on the roof in the dead of the night. Her daughter's bedroom, which had an exterior door with a screen door on it, became a point of concern. Both doors were always kept locked, yet one night something pulled the screen door so violently that it ripped off pieces of the house and siding along with it. Whatever caused that damage had to be incredibly strong. Her daughter had often mentioned hearing noises in the yard and near her door at night, which left her terrified. After the screen door incident, they decided to place a salt line at the entrance of her daughter's room. Strangely, ever since then, there's been no further disturbances at that particular door, though the occasional noises in the backyard persist. She couldn't say for sure if the salt was responsible for keeping this thing away, but it was yet another peculiar coincidence. One incident hit particularly close to home. Her 10-year-old indoor cat disappeared, and she believes that this creature is responsible. The cat wasn't fond of litter boxes, so she would let him out for brief bathroom breaks, usually 10 to 15 minutes before bringing him back inside. In November of 2024, he woke her up around 3 a.m. wanting to go out. She let him into the backyard, just like she had done countless times before, but this time he never returned. She searched everywhere for him, but he wasn't an adventurous cat. He would always do his business and then come right back inside. His disappearance left her absolutely heartbroken. To this day, she still misses him deeply. While she couldn't say with 100% certainty that this creature was responsible, the evidence and timing all pointed to this being the case. She hadn't seen it on the roof or hitting the house directly, but she had no other explanation. From what she learned through others' experiences, this type of behavior wasn't uncommon for these creatures. She's racked with guilt over letting her cat out that night. often wondering why she didn't go out with him or forced him to use the litter box. Of course, hindsight is always 20/20, but she never imagined it might harm her cat. She loved her cat as much as she loves her daughter. That loss marked a turning point. Fear gave way to anger, and she's determined not to let this thing harm anyone or anything she loves ever again. She's been wondering if these creatures can be harmed or killed. If others have had encounters where they take a stand, she would love to know. She realizes this all might sound unbelievable, even crazy, but she refuses to let it harm anyone else. She's even open to having her story told publicly, which is why she agreed to let me tell it on this channel, because she believes the more people who know about these creatures, the better equipped they'll be to protect themselves. For my thoughts on this one, I will share what I told Annie in my reply to her email. The first thing I did was express my deep condolences for her cat. I feel the same way about my dogs, and I would be devastated if something happened to one of them. I understand her anger at this thing, but I don't know that there is any way to hurt them, nor would I advise that anyone try. I would actually strongly recommend against it. The only story I've heard where someone did try, it didn't go well for them. He and his friends went out and tried to hunt one, but were badly injured. From the way she describes it, what she saw that night was definitely a crawler. It fits the description. I like how her maternal instincts kicked in and she sent her daughter away, thinking how to get this thing's attention if it did see her. That was very brave of her. I'm just glad it moved on and didn't pay either of them any mind. These creatures are very fast, and from the many encounters I've heard and done on this channel, they can be aggressive. One of the questions I asked Annie was if she felt evil coming from this thing, because in a lot of encounters, many of the people who see crawlers feel that they are just pure evil. It's the same with dogmen. Another thing she said that caught my eye was when she mentioned that she had her phone with her but didn't even think about trying to take a picture because she was just trying to wrap her mind around what she was seeing. This isn't the first time I've heard this, and it's totally believable. If I saw something straight out of fiction or nightmare or legend and lore, the last thing on my mind would be, hey, let me take a picture of this thing. It would be looking at it in shock, trying to figure out exactly what I'm seeing. Also, I have no doubt that it was this thing slapping her house and ripping the screen door off the outside of her daughter's room, along with chunks of the house. My first thought was to wonder if it messes with anyone else's home in her area. These creatures, crawlers especially, seem to like to look inside people's bedrooms for whatever reason. That comes up in a lot of stories where they're looking inside the window of someone's room, even if they are on the second floor. Annie has said that she has heard it on the roof before, and that would be terrifying. I'm not sure what I would do if I woke up in the middle of the night and heard something running across my roof. Just like I believe that it was this thing slapping the side of her house, I fully believe it was also this thing that was running across her roof. This has happened in many cryptid stories I've read and heard as well. In her response to my email, Annie wrote me back and said that she's been reflecting on the question of whether or not this thing felt evil. Interestingly, she wouldn't describe it as evil exactly, but more as a profound sense of fear and wrongness, if that makes sense. She says she is anything but fragile, but being only 4'11", she single-handedly confronted two men trying to break into her home about 6 months before she sent me her story. Without hesitation, she went outside, yelled at them, and by the end of it, they were apologizing and even trying to fix her fence. She says she is no stranger to the paranormal either, having grown up in a haunted house and experiencing various supernatural encounters throughout her life. None of those encounters even scared her, not like this one. She's not exaggerating when she says that that crawler terrified her. She felt an overwhelming fear for herself, but more importantly for her daughter. In that moment, she genuinely believed that the creature could harm or even kill them if it noticed them. That's why she was asking whether these entities can be hurt. She's trying to understand if they are physical, flesh and blood creatures or something else entirely. This distinction feels critical to her as she seeks answers about what she encountered that evening. In my response, I told Annie that I fully believe that these things are flesh and blood, but they have a supernatural quality to them as well. That's my thought on all cryptids, especially with how fast they move, how strong they are, and how some can communicate through mind speak. But most of them, if not all, are usually impervious to bullets, at least as far as the stories I have heard. I've only ever heard of one cryptid being killed, and it was a dogman that was shot through the eye by a truck driver. Other than this, bullets don't seem to faze them at all. The story I mentioned where the man and his friends went out to hunt the crawler, it was either too fast for them to hit with bullets, or it didn't faze the creature at all. It's very intriguing, but I'm good being left in the dark with my theories rather than finding out the truth in person. In her response, Annie says that she's not sure if it's purely coincidental that she was vacationing in the middle of a state forest known for cryptid activity, where weird events occur exclusively at night, only to have her own crawler encounter 3 weeks later. The connection gives her pause. She's only actually seen the creature twice, but in her other experiences she could sense its presence. It was this gut feeling that made her suspect that the crawler was involved, even without visually confirming it. Whenever it was around, the air seemed to shift, carrying a heavy sense of dread and fear. It was almost as if the creature emitted those negative emotions intentionally, like a self-defense mechanism. She knows it might sound a little far-fetched, but she genuinely believes it projects those feelings outward to protect itself. Whether it's some form of energy akin to radio waves or pure manipulation, she believes this ability serves as a shield for the creature. It also makes her wonder if other cryptids use similar methods, employing the emotional projection as a protective technique just like the crawler does. I agree with Annie's take that crawlers give off these feelings as a defense mechanism, which I've never even thought of before I heard her theory. But I also think, and have always thought, that they give off these feelings to affect their potential prey and anyone unlucky enough to be in their vicinity as well. There are many instances where these creatures manipulate our emotions and even our dreams, so I don't doubt for a second that they can give off these feelings as a defense mechanism or as an offensive strategy. As far as this thing following her home, the most famous case of this is Scott Carpenter, who went out to hunt Sasquatches and had some follow him home. It was not a short distance either. What proceeded next was these creatures harassing Scott around his home. Neighbors would even say that they saw strange, very tall figures in his yard at night. I'm not saying that's what's happening to Annie, but it isn't out of the realm of possibilities. However, the area she describes living in, with the wetlands conservation area right across the street from her home, is the perfect place for a cryptid. What do you think about Annie's story? Have you ever had an encounter with anything similar to what she has gone through? And what would you do if you saw something like that close to your house? And that's going to do it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed these stories. If you'd like to hear more stories like these and other types of cryptids, make sure to subscribe to the channel. If you want to send me your story, I'd love to read it. My email is wolfwhocriedcryptid@gmail.com. I will also put my email in the description below. With your permission, I may want to use your story in an episode. Even if you'd prefer I didn't share your story on my channel and just want someone to listen, email me. We can privately talk about your encounter. Also, if you'd like to come on an episode and tell your own story, email me. Please remember to keep it civil in the comment section. No one deserves to be ridiculed whether they believe or not. Thank you for listening. I'll catch you at the next episode.